All right, everybody good? I would like to call this here September 27th meeting of the City Council of Charleston to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Gregg, Councilmember Shealy, Councilmember Saccharin, Councilmember Mitchell, Councilmember Brady, Councilmember Gregory, Councilmember Waring, Councilmember Seekings, Councilmember Shade, Councilmember Bowden,
Here.
Councilmember Appel, Councilmember Parker, Mayor Tecklenburg.
Here. Now, if you would like to join us, Councilmember Waring will lead us in a prayer and the pledge.
Let us pray. Eternally, Father, as we come before you, we thank you for your amazing grace. And we are at a time today, we especially ask you for that grace to pray for those who were in harm's way of previous storms and are in harm's way of the current storm bearing down upon us. Please pray for those who need help right now, for assistance from those who can render that help. Medical help, and especially those families who have experienced a loss of a loved one. We pray for our neighbors and friends to heed to the advice. Protect yourself and get out of harm's way. Don't wait till the last minute. We pray for our people who protect us in this city, in this state. We pray to let them know that they are appreciated. They just don't dot an I or cross a T. We know they are essential and respect what they do. We ask that we come forth with the best of our intellect as we go about doing the business of the proud people we represent in this city, who allowed us to serve them. That's what we do. We pray for those first responders, the men and women in our military. Keep them and their family in your embrace as well. These prayers we ask for in your name. Let us all say amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. And I think most everyone knows, but in the most unlikely event that we would have to evacuate the building, these are our two doors out of the main hall, and there's one door over there. I would ask you in that case not to use the elevator, but to use the two stairs down and then the one stair out the front in the unlikely event we would need to leave the building. All right. Is Ms. Kearse with us? Oh, please come forward. We have this is Ann Kearse, everyone. And Ms. Gilbert, thank you for being with us. Y'all come on up. Good to see you again. So we recognize every year Mesothelioma Awareness Day, particularly given that in Charleston and the former location of Charleston Naval Base, we had many citizens who became subject to asbestosis or mesothelioma. So whereas mesothelioma is an aggressive asbestos-related cancer that affects the linings of the lungs, the heavy use of asbestos in manufacturing, industry, and construction has been recognized as an occupational health disaster in U.S. history. asbestos was used in the construction of virtually all office buildings, public schools, and homes before 1975. A high percentage of all mesothelioma victims were exposed to asbestos on naval ships and in shipyards, including, as I mentioned, here in Charleston. This is now believed to include many of the firefighters, police officers, and rescue workers from Ground Zero, also on September 11th. Whereas exposure to asbestos for as little as 1 month can result in mesothelioma 30 years later. In fact, that happened to my own brother-in-law. Whereas because of occupational Navy service-related household or even incidental exposures and the very long latency of the disease, tens of millions of Americans are now at risk for developing mesothelioma. And for decades, the need for research to develop effective treatments was overlooked. Whereas the result of this neglect is that treatments available today generally have only a limited effect, and most patients die within 12 to 15 months of diagnosis. Whereas the establishment of Mesothelioma Awareness Day would raise public awareness of the disease and of the need to develop effective treatments for it. Therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, along with City Council, do hereby proclaim today as Mesothelioma Awareness Day. Thank you again, Ms. Kears, for being with us. And if you would like to make any remarks, please proceed. Here's the.
Thank you, Mayor, very much.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll make it short there, but thank you for the Mesothelioma Appreciation Day. I'm with Motley Rice. I've been representing asbestos victims for over 30 years, my colleague Jan Gilbert. And we know this is touched very close to the mayor as well, but we appreciate the awareness because as much as asbestos is still not banned in the United States, it's still throughout a lot of our buildings and occupations, and still because it's a latent disease, a number of our citizens are still suffering from past exposures to asbestos, but we still see it today in products such as baby powder and talcs. And so I work with a lot of groups for awareness. This also allows us to bring more awareness. We just had an international monument placed in Vancouver, Canada for the whole North America. And it's again, because asbestos victims and the awareness is such an important part of what we do. And I thank the citizens of Charleston to continue with that. And especially for all the victims here in your city and throughout the state that have already perished to mesothelioma and the families affected. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
On behalf of Motley Rice also and Ms. Kears, we just want to thank you for having us here today. It is an honor, a sad one, but an honor to be able to represent people who have died of mesothelioma, whose lives have been touched by those who have become ill from asbestosis or mesothelioma. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Keep up the good work. Now I would like to invite Dave Eccles and Ryan Perry with the River Dogs organization to join me as we proudly proclaim, y'all come on up on the stage, a proclamation in honor of the River Dogs and their recent success. Whereas the city of Charleston has been a proud home to a minor league baseball team since 1980, when the team known as the Charleston Royals got started as a single A affiliate of the Kansas City Royals. The team underwent several changes in affiliation until eventually becoming what we know now as the Charleston River Dogs. Whereas the Charleston River Dogs entered their 2022 season energized and motivated with their first championship newly under their belt. And the Charleston River Dogs set a franchise record with 88 wins during the 2022 regular season, more than any other team in minor league baseball this season. Whereas the Charleston River Dogs were cheered on throughout the season as roughly 251,000 fans attended games at the Joe. Whereas the River Dogs led the Carolina League in home runs for the season. And on September 20th, the Charleston River Dogs won their second league championship in a row with a 6-2 win over the Lynchburg Hillcats. The two titles are the first in the franchise's history and ended their postseason with a 4-0 record and roughly 10,000 fans attending their two postseason home games. Whereas on behalf of the city of Charleston and all its citizens, We would like to congratulate the Charleston River Dogs on their remarkable achievement and commend them for both their perseverance and their dedication to the Charleston community. And y'all, I don't know if y'all went to our free concert with the symphony, but that Charlie the River Dog, he's one heck of a symphonic conductor. He did an incredible job. I got to add that. Now, therefore, I, John J. Tecklenburg, Mayor of the City of Charleston, do hereby proclaim today as Charleston River Dogs Day in the City of Charleston. Hip hip hooray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to dispel any rumors, that's not me in the costume. That's somebody else. But I do thank you for this. It's truly an honor, and the accomplishments of the team as reflected in this and the success they had this season is truly goes to the team and the coaches. They're the ones doing all the work with the athletes and the wins and the losses. But really, when it comes down to the community's involvement and our relationship, you know, at the end, when you talked about the attendance and just the enthusiasm and the support that we're getting from the community is tremendous. And I've been with the team over 20 years, and the relationship with the city and the Citadel is just something to behold for all municipalities and venues that need to work together like that. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Yes, sir. Councilmember Shade.
I think that this is the only time that Councilmember Shealy, Mr. Waring, myself, Councilmember Pell will steal this from his idea. We will say, go dog.
Go dog. Gotcha. So without objection from council during this presentation period, I'd like to go off the agenda for one item and ask you to meet our new emergency management director, Ben Almquist, who's been hard at work this week to give us just a brief update on the storm we're expecting later this week. And I know a few of you have met Ben, but probably not all of you. We are really blessed to have Ben with the City of Charleston. He just started, about 6 weeks ago, and he came to us from Berkeley County, and he's a seasoned emergency manager, and we're really glad to have him on our team. Ben, would you please give us an update?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, council. Give a couple of quick words on current situation with Hurricane Ian, its potential impacts to the City of Charleston, and what we're currently doing to mitigate against that. Hurricane Ian is currently, I believe the last update, a Category 3 storm with potential to become Category 4 over the next 24 hours. It is then predicted to rapidly decrease in strength before making landfall in the Tampa Bay area. Current tracks on this storm have changed significantly over the last 24 to 48 hours. It was originally expected to impact Tallahassee. It's obviously moved a lot since then. We are currently looking at some tracks that would bring it back into the Atlantic before coming up the Gulf Stream towards the Charleston area. There are some scenarios that indicate a direct hit if it does take that track. Currently, South Carolina EMD has more confidence that it will stay further inland and not get back out into the Atlantic. But of course, that's subject to change with conditions. The issue we're having with this is that it's such a slow moving storm that it is more susceptible to the changing weather conditions. So those pressure systems that come in, move it all around and change the direction. Potential impacts to the City of Charleston. Of course, the most prevalent impact is the one we deal with on a regular basis, and that's flooding. We are looking at high potential for significant flooding events, especially in the peninsula, those low-lying areas that we're all used to. There's also going to be a period of tropical storm force winds, sustained winds. Roughly, I would estimate about 8 to 10 hours worth of those sustained winds. That's largely going to impact us. What they're telling us right now is Thursday night into Friday. So right now, what we're doing is we're coordinating with all of our area partners, including the state, working on closing off events that might be impacted by this, making sure we've got all the resources that we're going to need in the event of heavy flooding operations. We're also working with all of our area partners, making sure we've got necessary manpower to respond and make sure that we're keeping the citizens of the city safe. Whenever you have an event like this, where there's a lot of lead time to it, about 99% of what we're doing right now is coordination and intelligence gathering. We're trying to get as much information as possible so we can make the best decisions that we can. And we're trying to provide as many updates as possible. This is a very fluid situation. As I said, it's a slow moving storm. So the conditions change constantly. But we are getting close to our essentially our trigger points where we will start activating the Municipal Emergency Operations Center. We'll change our operating condition and we'll start putting our subject matter experts and our decision makers in position that they need to be in to serve the citizens of the city.
Thank you. I think you're activating the MEOC tomorrow, correct?
Yes, sir. It'll be a partial activation of just essential staff tomorrow. And then Thursday morning is when we'll start getting in full swing.
All right. And to let y'all know, if you hadn't seen the release yet, we will offer sand for sand bags for our citizens starting tomorrow at 5 different locations throughout the city, starting at 9 o'clock, I believe.
Yes, sir. At
Yes.
8 or 9.
8 o'clock, maybe. Yes. Sir. Any questions for Ben? Councilmember.
Thank you,
Seekings.
Mr. Mayor. One
Yeah.
quick question and a comment. Welcome, by the way. Glad to
Thank you,
see you. Look forward to working with you. Parking garages, if we're going to go to sort of work from home on Friday, can we make an announcement sooner rather than later about what we're going to do about opening the parking garages?
Yes, sir. We're in coordination on that already. We want to make sure that we've got as much intel as possible before making that decision.
Okay. And just one other thing, Mr. Mayor, it's going to rain. I think we're pretty clear on that. And we've got some big high tides coming and it's
Yep.
going to be the weekend. And once the storm goes through, it's going to be really nice. Please stay home. Don't come to the peninsula and look and see what happened. Go look and see because every time you drive down a street that's flooded, it's another storm event.
That's
So
right.
please stay home. Our police are gonna be out there. We're gonna barricade off the streets. We do it whenever it floods. Don't come down and drive around in your truck and take a look at it. It's really problematic and we've
Yeah.
got some laws against that. And if you do it, you're gonna be subject to them. So please, 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 stay at home.
No
Thanks.
wake zone.
No, we are one big no wake zone. Thank you.
That's correct. Councilmember Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that we discussed yesterday at our Public Works and Services Committee meeting, we were talking about the sandbags and we had used to use the Piggly Wiggly site as one of our locations. And I was out there in our past storms. And what I mentioned to Mr. O'Brien yesterday, I want to mention to you as well. It's always good to have, and I think Tom reassured us, there'll be a supervisor out there at the sandbag distribution points just to help coordinate and organize that because it does get a little chaotic with the number of people showing up and parking and there are folks who do need help out there, by the way. And my experience is that there's a lot of elderly people who come out there. So if there's a way of organizing and helping people who need physical assistance with the sandbags, that's really, really important. Some of the things we overlook from time to time in helping those folks. And Councilmember Seekings, it is a rite of passage in Charleston to go to the Battery and hold on to a rail to get splashed on from time to time. So, yeah,
We just don't want to get splashed by cars driving
I
by,
agree with that.
okay? Please.
yeah, I agree with that.
All right. Any other questions? Well, Ben, thank you. I know you got to get back. Already he's been doing a terrific job, y'all coordinating, particularly with the county and state folks who we knew already. So it's, thank you, sir, for your report. Okay, next up is our public hearings. If I could call on Mr. Morgan to come forward. I think we got 6 items this evening.
Sir, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Is-
So we'll have
Number
the
one.
slide show up here, I think in a second.
Is number 1 going to be deferred?
Yes, the applicant has requested a deferral of number 1. And I can give background on it if there's someone here who wants to speak on it, but.
Thank you.
Yes, we will proceed with the public hearing on.
And so, Mr. Mayor, members of council, so item E1 is 35 and 37 Prelo Street. It's about a quarter of an acre. It's a request to include that property in the accommodations overlay zone. And the property is formerly known, most widely known as the location of the Harbor Club. It's across the street from the condominiums and the City Art Gallery. It's adjacent to the Vindu Hotel. We have some other images here. but they would like to be included in the accommodations overlay. Just here's our comprehensive plan recommendation. It's part of the neighborhood recommendation in the comprehensive plan. And that's what neighborhood says in the comprehensive plan. Here's an aerial of the property. Again, it's in a fairly dense area of town. It's pretty much all buildings and streets and parking. And here's a view of it from the street. And another one from the street, across the street, and adjacent, and other adjacent as the Bindu Inn. And this was an area that was part of the accommodations overlay in 2013. This was reviewed at Planning Commission, and it was taken out in 2013 because there was no thought that it needed to become a hotel at that point in time. And it was the Harbor Club as well at that time too. This is just a little bit of a history of what had been the accommodations overlays over time in that area, starting with a much broader area in 87, shrank down in 98, and then in 2013 shrank down even further. And this was part of some of those removals in 2013. And now this is where we are in 2022 for the accommodations overlay. And our planning commission did recommend approval on this. Our staff had recommended disapproval, but the planning commission did recommend approval for this item.
Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? 3537 Prelo Street. Yes, sir. Please come forward.
And Mr. Mayor, what's the time limit for the public hearings?
Let's say a minute and a half.
All right, thank you.
I really wanted to request from Councilman Mitchell an extra 50 seconds. Yeah, I need another minute. I'm doing a notice, basically. Got an Administrative Procedure Act in 1946. I'm doing the notice. Okay, under the Planning and Enabling Act. Okay. Now, on July 29, 2022, U.S. Court of Appeals under 28 U.S.C. 351, the Judge Joseph Johnson III just did engage in conduct prejudicial to the effective and expeditious administration of the business of the court. In the memorandum of order expressed, page 3, I went to school at Morgan State University in Maryland. Upon filing of the special committee report, Judge Niemeyer out of Maryland, which I went to Morgan, accused himself from judicial counsel's review. The affidavit was prepared in response to a threatening communication in 2001 delivered to Joe Dawson's former office, county attorney. I handled it with lots of his counsel from 1999 to 2022. Order issued September 1st to my former county attorney that IFP statutes provide Congress safeguard public against abuse by evil-minded persons. Validating my DOJ notice, investigated use of my personal information. Congress decided that this kind of speech is not only regrettable and dangerous, it's also indictable punishment of crime. Okay, so therefore, all my public comments from 1991 to 2022 need to be sent back to the U.S. Attorney's Office. They say the Attorney General's office. Anthony G. Bryant don't run from nothing or nobody. Born and raised in the port, born and raised in the peninsula.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
Stephanie Wilson Gentile, President of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association.
Pull that mic down a little towards you if you don't mind.
I don't want to break it.
You won't.
I'm the president of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association, and I'm here in support of moving this building back into the accommodations overlay zone. The building has been vacant and abandoned for 3+ years. It has been a magnet for graffiti, garbage, and vagrancy. While we would prefer a residential project, the building itself doesn't really lend itself to that. And therefore, we stand in support of this becoming back into the accommodations overlay zone, excuse me, and it become a boutique hotel. We have spent months with AJ Capital, who are the developers of this. We know their work very well, and therefore we are in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Peggy Malaspina. I'm also a member of the French Quarter Neighborhood Association, and we voted as a board to support this project, moving back into the accommodation zone. Stephanie has given you all good reasons. In a perfect world, this may be a neighborhood park, but we live in a real world, and we believe that they will be, AJ Capital and their plans will be good neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Would you like to be heard?
Evening. We keep building hotels. Hotels, hotels, and hotels and parks. We just keep on building. Now, you know that word hotel? It sounds like a hoe, W-H-O-R-E. And it is telling on Charleston. It is telling on Charleston. When you look at the word storm, S-T-O-R-M, and you put a number by each letter, you get 85. 85 is 13. 13 represent government. And what God is doing with these storms is trying to wake you up. As I said, racism is dead. We're not suffering from racism. We are suffering from greed, envy, jealousy, and ignorance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to be heard on 35 and 37 Prelo Street?
And Mr. Mayor, we did receive one comment online. Alice Wakefield said the old Harbor Club building had been vacant and an attraction for vagrants and a neighborhood eyesore for too many years. The creation of a useful building by a respected developer was the best offer for improving the present situation. The FQ&A board supported changing the zoning from limited business to a hotel. She was a member of the FQ&A and supported the requested change. And those are all the comments we received.
Thank you. So the item was deferred by the applicant, but we'll bring this back to council for a vote. I will just comment on how the restaurant scene in Charleston has changed. Now you can't even make up your mind which fine restaurant you want to go. I remember when this was the Colony House, and it was one of the very few restaurants you would even go to. But anyway, it's an aside. Mr. Morgan.
On this, I know we're deferring it, but just so everybody's identification, Mr. Morgan, what height restrictions are in this area? Would that be impacted by this reclassification?
It would not change by virtue of their request. Their request is just to change the use within the building to the accommodations overlay. And I don't think that the folks who are requesting the accommodations overlay want to add on to the building. I think they're just going to reuse the current building.
Thanks.
Councilmember Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Why did staff recommend against approval?
Our feeling was that back in 2013, when it was taken out of the accommodations overlay and we were kind of tightening up those areas, that there's plenty of other area that hotels can go in the city. And we were concerned that hotels in this area would impact the residents more.
Could you go back to the accommodations overlay and then reference where this parcel is?
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is at present.
Yep.
Where the overlay is, and this parcel is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. All right, item number 2.
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, if I
Oh,
can.
Councilmember Siki.
I know that we did this because we were advertised for public hearing. I do think there's probably going to be some more comments to be made on this. And so once we get back on an agenda, we might have to do it through council, but I think there's some others who would like to comment on it.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, the next item is 92 President Street. It's 0.05 of an acre. It's a very small parcel. You see it outlined in yellow on the map ahead in front of you here. It is behind another parcel that was not long ago rezoned to the 5-story height district. And this parcel is also seeking the 5-story Old City Height District. The building to the east, and we'll show you some pictures in just a minute, but it is in a 4-story district. However, it counts as 5 stories based on the way we count heights now. And there's also a parking garage to the southwest that is 5 stories as well. And we'll show you some other pictures of those as well. So it's very, very small parcel at the rear here. It is in our neighborhood edge neighborhood as recommended in the comprehensive plan. And this includes kind of a mixture of things that would be on the edge of neighborhoods. The request would not be against what Neighborhood Edge talks about or the neighborhood district either. This is an aerial image of the property. It is a parking lot at present, and the larger parcel that is about to be developed is just to the north of it. Here is the criteria that is used in the zoning ordinance for a rezoning. As you all make your decision, you would need to evaluate in part the context of the property, the character of the immediate area, street widths around the property, and whether the requested rezoning would be compatible with the surrounding properties. So that's why we do a lot of pictures and things to show you all what is going on around it. Here is the subject property. You see the 5-story condo building to the rear. That's actually in a 4-story district, but its count says 5 stories. There's that same building. That's a 4-story portion of the building, and then 5 stories more adjacent to this property. This is another image of that adjoining property. And then across the street to the southwest is the parking deck that MUSC owns that roughly is 5 stories. And then this is the new building that has been approved by BAR, the property to the north, which actually, because they got architectural merit, they have 6 stories in this building. It's 5 stories of the regular height, and then a 6th story is a setback kind of penthouse area. So you get a sense of what's going on around it. Again, this is a view of it on President Street that will be there in the future. And let's see, the Planning Commission did review this and recommended approval 6-0.
All right. Would anyone like to be heard on this matter? Hearing none, it comes to council. A motion to approve and a second. Any discussion or questions? Councilmember Sackman.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Morgan, is there any sense of what the applicant is attempting to do there?
They have not brought forward an idea on that. So I would imagine that they may have other folks that are interested in it. And since the other areas are surface parking lots, and so it may be that other properties are acquired and added to this one.
Thank you.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes, sir.
You said twice that the property all around it was 4, but acted like 5. What did you mean by that?
So in other words, the property back up here. So the
You had that picture of it.
This is a 4-story height district on the eastern side, at the 5-story in the west and 5-story to the north.
Yeah.
But this building, this first building here, is essentially 5 stories the way we count stories today. It has a level of parking and then 4 floors of residential structure. So we call this a 5-story building. It technically would be a grandfathered building, and then it has another building here that's 4 stories.
And if you were to tear that building down and build something new, how?
You would only be able to build 4 stories.
4 stories.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Questions? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it.
I would move to take 3 through 6 together.
All in favor of taking 3 through 6 together, please say aye. Any opposed? All right, let's run through them all and then we'll take comments with them all together.
I will try to do these super fast. 29 Avondale.
Take your time.
1/3 of an acre. Okay.
We're just taking them together. We're not.
Recently annexed into the city on August 16th. It's a request for a single family SR1, and the property is here on the map in front of you. And we have just images, the comp plan map, and then the property itself. Planning Commission recommend approval in this one. The next one is 309 Cessna Avenue in DuPont Station. It's 1,107 acre annexed in the city on August 16th. And it is a request for SR1 also. And you see it in front of you. There's the comprehensive plan recommendation, and there is the subject property. And then we have 2157 Wapu Drive and Riverland Terrace. It's nearly 1/4 of an acre. And there's the image of the property. It also is up for SR1. And it's to the Riverland Terrace neighborhood. And Planning Commission did recommend for this one as well. And then finally is a commercial annexation. This is at 1989 Maybank Highway. It's a recently built small shopping or restaurant area next to the poorhouse and across the street, a little bit further down the street from the Terrace Theater. It's at the corner of Woodland Shores and Maybank. This is the comprehensive plan recommendation neighborhood edge. And then the subject property that again was recently built. And it has a few restaurants and bar type facilities in it. And Planning Commission recommended 6-0 for the general business zoning for this property.
All right, would anybody like to be heard on the annexations of, not the rezonings of these 4 properties? Seeing none, they come to council. And that motion is to approve all 4.
3 through 6.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Our minutes aren't quite ready yet, so we're going to come back to them at our next meeting. And so next up is our citizens participation period. Madam Clerk, if you would kindly facilitate.
We have 7 people signed up to speak.
Okay,
And would you like to set a time limit?
let's do 2 minutes.
All right, the time is 2 minutes. Anthony Bryant.
My father bought his house with 3 sons, 1968. Arnold M. Bryant Sr. ain't no coward. Okay, we don't do coward in our family. Now, there's a chairman of the Charleston County Planning and Public Works Commission that is under assumption that, and others believe that they can take people's reputations and align it. Well, I made public comment for the congressional districts, the Senate. I've made public comment my whole life. And I refuse to be a boy for any political party, Republican or Democrat. I'm a Black man first. That's what I am first. First of all, I'm a Black man in America. And so I'm not gonna sit around here and shuck and jive and tap dance with nobody no more. Be a real brother. That's what you need to be, a real brother. Okay, 9 people died in our community, 9, 7 years ago. They ain't bother nobody. How you think somebody gonna feel after that? I applaud Dudley Gregory, keep wearing the others. I didn't feel that way 7 years ago. I didn't. There were people I knew personally, the oldest person in my community, Dudley knew who I know on my block. That's like my grandmother, sitting in her car praying that day that we was upset about Black folk being humiliated and destroyed. I'm sick of it. Seeing our young brothers not even educated in this community anymore, destroying themselves. And then you're on TV, not educating them at all, and demanding them to be like they're Harvard students. They're destroying themselves out there. That's our children doing that to each other. How you think I feel when a kid can't read in my neighborhood? What, he gonna go work at Google? Boeing? He going to prison. That's what he going at. Now I ain't gonna lie to them and tell them they're going someplace else. You lied to them. You tell them they're going someplace else. Prepare yourself for your prison cell. That's where you're going.
Time. Mohammed Idris.
This picture is a picture that they say the image of Jesus. And if you pronounce it, the name Jesus that they got, his name, his Hebrew name is Isa, the son of Mary. Now you see that J-E-S-U-S. The people who put that together were saying just us, not nobody else, Chinese, Japanese, just us, the corrupt people in the world who put that together. Because the Bible says you don't have no image or likeness of God, none whatsoever. As I said before, racism is dead. A Black man who was a father with an African married a white woman from Kansas City, and the baby is born and become the president of the United States of America, you should know racism is dead. When you see Charleston take and elect a Black bishop that came in here in this chamber and spoke on 13 and the 13 tribes of Israel know for surety that racism is dead. And what we are suffering from is greed, jealousy, envy, and ignorance. Thank you.
Ann Cleveland.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Ann Cleveland, the Executive Director of the Charleston Library Society on King Street. Dominion has recently announced its intent to sell the property north of the Library Society and Gibbs Museum to the highest bidder. City Council has an extraordinary opportunity to create a legacy for Charleston's historic district that I believe will profoundly affect the life of Lower King Street and the Low Country for the rest of our lives. The property is the last open space in the historic district. It offers the only opportunity to have our generation's vision for the area, tying two cultural organizations together with an open space for shoppers, readers, artists, visitors, and enhancing the business district. We believe the city should help purchase the parcel, selling at market value the pieces next to the Gibbs and the Library Society to our respective organizations and dedicate the remaining portion to a park. The library and the Gibbs provide vital cultural appeal and strength to people who are interested in investing in a growing city. Except for the existing E.B. White Historical Building and the historic small building facing King Street, the parcel is either vacant or comprised of non-historic unused buildings that will be torn down. Proceeding in this way substantially reduces the city's investment in the project completely. Since Dominion's announcement of the sale, we have been approached by developers who have envisioned everything from a glass event space to 8 stories of garage and condominiums over every square inch of that property. Our efforts to save this open space from one more hotel or condominium development is a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Time.
Please know that we won't ever have this chance again. Thank you.
Charles McLendon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Charlie McClendon. I'm the current board chair of the Charleston Parks Conservancy. I'd like to say a few words about the Conservancy, its partnership with the city, and its mission in support of the parks. As many of you know, and it was talked about earlier today, the Ways and Means, the Conservancy has had a long and successful partnership with the city for over 15 years in renovating, maintaining, and providing programming in our parks. In collaboration with the Parks Department, we have renovated and beautified over 25 parks in the city, and we currently maintain 20 of those parks with a talented staff and a very dedicated volunteer network. In 2021, we continued that collaboration with the Parks Department in the renovation of Hempstead Mall and the creation of the Susie Jackson Freedom Memorial Garden. Conservancy has expanded programming over the last few years to bring more cultural events to the city parks for the benefit of the community and the visitors of Charleston. Over 20,000 citizens have been part of our sponsored events, both before COVID and after coming out of the lockdown. And we certainly expect that to grow. We are expanding educational, health, and wellness program, including a newly launched horticultural fellowship program. This internship will bring a new generation of horticultural professionals for the benefit specifically of our parks, our city, and the region. Most recently, as the mayor mentioned in the Ways and Means section, the Conservancy has endorsed and will align its future work with the One Park Charleston Parks and Recreational Master Plan adopted by the City Council in 2021. Since 2007, the Parks Conservancy has raised over $23 million from both individual and corporate support, as well as grant providers.
Time.
We're very proud of that, but we need to do more. And we thank you for your support Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your support, and thank you to the City Council.
Tony Daniel.
Good afternoon, Mayor. 2 years ago, my father had a stroke. I came home to take care of him. He was in intensive care for a month. He was in the hospital for 2.5 months. Going back and forth from my home, I was stuck in traffic. I couldn't believe it. Where did all this traffic come from? So I contacted my local councilman, Ross Appel. The very first words out of his mouth to me was untrue. And I found out from the Freedom of Information Act that I filed, I saw all the things that he did to try and immediately stop me. He even tried to rally the neighborhood to send you sham letters, which you accepted. Those are those 38 letters that everybody, whoa, look at this. All it was a video stamped proposal. It was as big a sham as the election in Ukraine. They didn't even write their own words. They said, oh, we want the roads closed. Of course, if you listen to Mr. Appel, the roads are not closed. So I don't know if they're closed or open. Trees within the middle of a road are closed. How long am I going to have to come here? Because the law says you cannot close a road without a vote for city council or judge's order, which do not exist. We don't have those. So we don't even need to go further into the case law that's required to be met before you can close a road. First of all, you have to have a vote and it has to be legal. Neither of those have taken place. So therefore the roads are illegally closed. When are you going to do something about this, sir? And then we held the study, Mr. Brady. You said, after this study, we will look at it and we'll see what it proves. It proves exactly what I was saying. It says that traffic is overwhelming by my father's house. Overwhelming 8 times the speeders. And it didn't even include the school traffic. It was only Burning Tree Road. They left off half the study. I'm not sure how many times I have to come here before something happens. You know, some modicum of decency. We talked last time I was here about how horrible human beings can be. How horrible of a human being do you have to be to take advantage of someone who's in critical condition in the emergency room and his military veteran son? That's what we're talking about. Thank you.
Jerome Harris.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm Jerome Harris. I'm co-chair of the Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission. You have on your agenda tonight proposals to make some amendments to the ordinance that you passed last February. The commission has been meeting since June. At our second meeting, the members of the commission, 60% of the new members of the commission, those who had no service before, indicated that they felt that they needed adequate time to understand the context, content, and the process of things like the final commission report, the master plan, and other documents that are referred to as part of the work that we have to do. At that second meeting, a request was made to extend, to revise the language in the ordinance requiring a report of each of the recommendations by the end of the fifth meeting, which would have been in November. The members say that just doesn't make sense. It's not practical. So one of the portions of the amendment is there. One of the other things in the Second Amendment, Section 209A, you neglected in passing the ordinance to establish a process by which a vacancy, should it occur, could be filled. The language presented provides a provision for that. It's important that the commission, which has not yet reached its full complement of appointees, have that so we can finish our work. I urge you to pass this these amendments on first reading. Thank you.
Jordy Yarborough.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Jordy Yarborough at South Carolina Ports Authority. Coming before you this evening, first of all, to highlight the item on your agenda tonight regarding the stormwater check valves at Union Pier Terminal. As was mentioned earlier, we appreciate the collaborative effort to bring forth the solution to the sunny day flooding on Washington Street. And then secondly, to remind you all, I sent you emails with the announcement for an event that we're holding Thursday, starting at 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Union Pier Passenger Terminal. It's a community engagement event. We are seeking input on the redevelopment project of Union Pier. Recognizing the storm, I will say it will all be held indoors at the passenger terminal. And for those that cannot attend, please provide some comments on the website unionpiersc.com. Thank you.
And those were all the comments we received. Speakers that we received. We had 3 comments submitted online. Anthony Bryant commented on the CARES and ARPA funding and said the 2020 redistricting map was codification for gentrification. The ARPA commitment for so-called affordable housing without land use exemptions for the BZA and Preservation Commission of Charleston County would derail the county council's intentions. He also referenced the Dominion energy rate increase in which the company paid franchise fees to Charleston County Council and the city of Charleston, which received CARES and ARPA funding. Tony Daniels said, according to the U.S. Department of Transportation, left-hand turns were among the most dangerous maneuvers a driver can make. Every school day, twice a day, parents at Harborview School had to navigate a dangerous left turn through standing traffic on Harborview Road. It was illegally standing by the side of the road and in the median. He asked if council was not concerned for the safety of parents at the school and said they were endangering school children with their blatant disregard for the illegal road closings. Charlie Smith objected to the discussion under agenda item KB4 as the agenda item read discussion to remove DuPont Road from San Rittenberg to Savannah Highway and Orleans Road from San Rittenberg to Savannah Highway from the design review corridor. When the backup document at community development also indicated the removal of Savage Road from DRB jurisdiction and would permit the demolition of any building within any designated job center or industrial district in the city, subject only to staff approval. It came at a time when West Ashley citizens were demanding more protection from DRB and not less. He said the proposal would undermine 18 years of work by the DRB and 5 years of work by the West Ashley Revitalization Commission. Those were all the comments we received.
Well, thank you all for participating this evening. So glad to hear your remarks and comments. So next up is our council committee reports. First one being our Committee on Community Development. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over our report on Resiliency and Sustainability Advisory Committee by Katie Mccain is coming forward. And while she's stepping up, I don't know how many of y'all saw the display of electric vehicles out front. There was a Ford F-150 pick-em-up truck. Man, that thing was nice. There was a Tesla. There was a General Motors Volt. And I'm glad to report the availability is increasing. The prices are coming down a little bit to where they're a little more affordable, particularly if you take into account the maintenance and fuel costs over time. You can afford to pay a little more for electric vehicle and actually save some money. So we hope as this availability supply continues to increase and prices moderate a little bit, that we'll start as a city to purchase more electric vehicles. Now, some of the other ones I must share with you. I love this electric street sweeper we saw just a couple of weeks ago on demonstration, but it's like over double the cost. So we might need to wait a little while till the pricing comes down on some of those other models. But anyway, with that, Katie Mccain giving us a report on our Resiliency and Sustainability Committee. Katie.
Thank you, Mayor Tecklenburg, and good evening, members of the City Council. The Resiliency and Sustainability Advisory Committee met the end of August. There were 11 of 13 members present at that meeting. There were 3 main items on their agenda. The first one was the implementation progress on the Climate Action Plan. I gave a report and talked about some of our priority projects that we are seeking budget funding for 2023. The committee actually asked me to go into a lot greater detail on that report with all of council. So I will run through the other 2 agenda items fast and return to that item in a moment. So the next item on the agenda was strategies for electric vehicle infrastructure policy in new development. And the committee talked about this. So we reviewed all kinds of other examples from other cities, especially in the Southeast. This idea is really just about how can new development, they already have parking regulations and requirements. Could we consider any requirements for, adding panel capacity or conduit to make it a lot easier to install EV charging stations, especially in multifamily? it is much more affordable to install them at construction than to go back and retrofit. So the committee discussed that. There was strong support for doing something. What that is yet to be determined. And they suggested reaching out to the development community for their feedback. So we are doing just that. And the Chamber of Commerce had volunteered to help get a group of development-minded folks together to start getting input. So we'll be doing that really soon. And finally, the last item on the agenda was to review a draft amendment to address the extra thick plastic bags that you see in some places. This amendment really only affects just a handful of really large corporate businesses. Our local businesses are doing a great job with the ordinance. So the committee supported moving this forward, making sure that we are collaborating with our other regional partners to make sure that code gets passed at the same time to make it easier for our businesses to comply. And then we had a public comment period and there were a couple folks that spoke. So I wanted to go back to the climate action plan implementation as again, the committee asked me to give you all a report on that. So I often feel like we don't celebrate our achievements enough. So I did take a few moments to talk about what our achievements were in our first year. So I'll repeat those. I'll start with, achievements that other departments achieved. There's many departments involved in implementing the climate action plan. So to begin with, last year, we started a brand new bike share program. That kudos to traffic and transportation for working on that. Legal really helped with that. Planning was a big part of it too. So that's something to be excited about. We also learned the end of August, we won that $7 million raise grant to help design and clean up the low line to really get started on that connectivity project, which is huge. I know the executive office helped with that. The planning department really helped with that. And of course, BFRC and our grant writer were a really big part of that. Our HR department implemented a permanent teleworking program, and that has resulted in a huge reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from city staff commuting to work. With any additional flexibility, city staff could prevent emissions even more and reduce their commute times and save money. Our planning department and our Board of Architectural Review passed a policy statement on solar. So that means anyone designing for renewable energy now has some guidance on what the BAR is looking for. And recently, our Cultural Affairs Division had a huge win at our farmers markets where we were able to bring back volunteers to help with food donation for those items that could no longer be sold. So some wins from other departments. We also had some wins within our Sustainability Division. So as you know, we passed the Climate Action Plan in May 2021. We then immediately implemented a Climate Ambassador program where we trained and empowered about 20 local leaders to go out in the community to talk about our climate action plan, to share what the city is doing, and more importantly, to help the community understand what they can do to help be part of the solution. So I'm pleased to say, we've had over 40 presentations given in the community, over 1,000 community members have been reached in that process, and that's all through the power of volunteers. So that's pretty exciting. We also hosted an electric lawn care expo in May where businesses and residents got to experience electric lawn care equipment like lawnmowers and leaf blowers and trimmers all firsthand. They got to test them out and demo. And we passed, if you remember, the leaf blower resolution last fall, where we committed to transitioning all of our city leaf blowers, which we have about 90, to electric or other alternative options by next summer. Our Adopt a Drain program is now regional, and we've added county drains in that too. So we are now inviting other jurisdictions to join as well. So that's really exciting. We all know water knows no boundaries, right? We started a new mattress recycling program last year and had some great impacts from that. The community really loved it. And it's a great way to reduce our garbage costs and our intensity for crews picking up trash. And we also managed the Charleston Rainproof program, and we piloted a mini grant program back in 2020. We repeated that again this fall. We're in the middle of it right now, where we're basically providing funding to help residents, businesses, and organizations cover about half the cost of the expenses to install their own rain garden on their private property. This was an initiative recommended out of the Dutch Dialogues process to help collect water on both public and private property. So since the Climate Action Plan is a 5-year strategic plan, there was actually a recommendation, a great one from our CFO, Amy Wharton, who suggested, Katie, we really need a budget implementation plan to go with this. So we know we are on track to implement all these items within the 5-year period. So took that to heart. We created a budget plan and are working across different departments to make that happen. I did want to briefly share the priority projects for next year that do need some budget consideration and were part of the requests. So from the sustainability office, we started a brand new composting program in January. As you know, it's been really successful. We've figured out all the kinks. We've now invited other regional partners to join. We are actually expanding this weekend. Folly Beach and Charleston County added their own drop sites. So this budget request is to continue the 3 sites we have, add 3 additional sites so we can actually make it a full service program and serve everyone in the city. So for example, we don't have a drop site on Daniel Island right now. We want a grant that will cover all the new signage and marketing costs. This budget request is just for the hauling because grants usually don't cover ongoing expenses. That project is expected to remove 220 tons of food from our garbage collection annually. So think of the cost savings, the time savings, especially as our garbage crews have limited capacity. Another request was for our Charleston Rainproof mini grant program. We did $5,000 this year. We're hoping to double that to 10,000. That 10,000 number is estimated to divert 1 million gallons of stormwater from our central drainage system. So small amount of funding having really big impact there. And then finally, for our division, there was a personnel request for a communication and community engagement manager to really get out in the community and help encourage and inspire everyone to be part of this solution, because we know city government can't do this alone. So I also wanted to briefly touch, I met with other departments who also have roles in the climate action plan to talk about what their priorities were for 2023 and what they would be asking for in the budget. So public service is asking for that mattress recycling program. It's only a $10,000 request, and that would get 500 mattresses out of our trash trucks, which is really helpful. They also, I know they received some funding for the garbage can audit. I believe they are requesting the final amount of funding for that audit. That audit's really important because it helps us create data so we understand who is using all the garbage bins, and it helps us to reevaluate our processes so we can figure out how we can incentivize more recycling and more composting and encourage folks to put less in their garbage cart, which saves us money. Then we have 3 departments that have leaf blowers. So stormwater, recreation, and the golf course, and of course, parks. So those 3 departments will be requesting funding to transition their gas-powered leaf blowers to direct electric, because we committed to doing that by next summer. Our Parks Department has a few priorities that are covered under the Climate Action Plan. The street tree inventory, I thought I heard that this was funded through ARPA funding this summer, and I recently found out there was a little confusion on what was funded, and it was something else related to trees. So this is actually, I don't believe is funded yet, but could potentially be funded in ARPA or considered in the city budget. The plug for the street tree inventory is you can't manage what you can't measure, right? So having this data, knowing where the trees are, knowing their species, knowing their age, helps us plan for how we take care of that canopy, because we have to take care of what we have that's existing before we can even think about planting a bunch of new trees, which is really important too. So the Parks Department also manages our capital improvement plan. And when they are looking to make buildings, our city buildings, more sustainable and resilient, sometimes that means going above code. So looking at how we can better fund that capital improvement plan to make our city buildings more sustainable and resilient. Also, operational funding and capacity to better maintain our existing facilities. So we have, high performing HVAC systems, but if they are not maintained regularly and they are not functioning properly, then we're losing out, right? And it's really important to have this maintenance in place and set in order to plan for renewable energy. So that's what we're waiting on. And then let's see, our BFRC department. So we are working on expanding electric vehicle charging infrastructure especially our city parking garages. So we requested that in the budget, and a giant plug for a second grants manager position so we can take advantage of all this great federal funding coming down the pipeline. So the Resilience and Sustainability Advisory Committee voted unanimously to support all of these budget requests. As you heard, many of them are very minor, but they have really big impacts. And just keep in mind that the Climate Action Plan, that everything in there has multiple co-benefits with it. So we're talking about saving money, we're talking about reducing flooding, we're talking about protecting air quality, and these are things we can all get behind. So if you have any questions or are interested in being involved or learning any more data about any of that, I'm happy to share that at a later time.
Thank you, Katie. Anybody have questions? Councilmember Gregory.
Are we going to get a report on the heat study that was done?
I'm sorry, which study?
The heat study.
Study.
Dale.
Dale needs to answer that question.
Dale's managing
We
that
will get
project.
I'm sure there'll be a report on it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Katie, thank you for your fine work. It seemed to me for years we were dealing with the impacts of climate change, but not really focused on doing something about it ourselves. We were the first city in South Carolina, by the way, to pass a climate action plan. And it's good to see that we're actually following through on it. So thank you for your fine work.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Now we'll get to our council committee report. First up being our Committee on Community Development, Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council. Community Development Committee meeting was held on Thursday, September 15th at 3 p.m. You got to bear with me a little bit because my eyes still not seeing clearly. So I'm gonna try to get through it. The first one under old business, we had discussion of the ADU ordinance, and it was only for information only. But we had a lot of discussion pertaining to it, and a lot of questions was asked and answered. And then under two, discussion of the South Carolina Senate bill, I think it was 233 or 236. It's 236. That was an error on that. And that's the property tax exemption that was approved. And it was explained to us by our corporate counsel. And that's right, it's 236, correct? They have it on 233, but I just want to make sure. Okay, all right. So that was explained by our corporate counsel, and that was approved. I just want to make sure we got it right. Then we had a discussion. Then we had a discussion of the City of Charleston Code Section 21-52. In that, Ken Bernardo of the billing officers, he explained his role as a public safety officer, and so we just got information from him during that time. So no action was taken on that particular one. We turn over, and we have a discussion to remove DuPont Road from Cyberton Boulevard onto Savannah Highway. And that was referred to legal, and it was removed from our this agenda. So it was our attorneys will get back with us on that once they go through with the file exactly what's the legal ramification on that. And then we went into executive session pertaining to just to receive 8 pieces of code, just to receive advice from our legal staff, and no action was taken on that at all. So I'm just asking for approval of that report.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you, council member. Next is our Committee on Public Works, Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items, all actionable items that you see on the agenda pass unanimously, and I move to be accepted.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, the ayes have it.
And the fifth item for discussion was a continuation of the discussion that we had at council last week, and the committee last week, about any areas that flooded, in particular during a low tide, where homes, water came in homes, in particular threatened homes. Each person is putting together their list, and I think that's a continuing effort. So just a reminder to you all, those on the committee are doing it. So those other council members who are not on the committee, please do it. And one thing that we didn't discuss that I want to bring up was Councilmember Appel, if you remember last week, said that we need to take a Navy SEAL approach to it, basically an increased manpower approach. As a result of hearing that, Councilman Gregory said suggested something called an indefinite delivery contract. Councilmember Gray, can you speak to that? And then Mr. Fountain, could you address your response to Councilmember Gregory? It actually came as a result of something Councilmember Appel said last week. I mean, 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Yes, sir.
did listen to.
Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, I did listen to Councilmember Appel's suggestion about the SWAT team, and if it costs $30,000, let's get the job done. You know, in my other career, when we had shortages, we either did an indefinite quantity contract or indefinite delivery contract. I did get a response from Mr. Fountain, and they're aware of it. However, in order to manage it, that may be the problem that we face. Because with all indefinite quantity, definite delivery contracts, you're going to have a representative or a person to oversee it and to manage it. I'll just leave the explanation to Matt, but he did respond in length that he was aware of the ability, but there's still some issues that we face in order to be able to implement such a contract. Matt.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Councilman. So for clarity, the Stormwater Department does in fact have existing indefinite delivery contracts that we had implemented a couple of years ago with some of the staffing shortages that we were having. We also use them occasionally for some technical resources that are beyond what we generally staff at a city level. Primarily our work is for IDCs are in pipe cleaning, pipe inspection work, and then anything related to the brick arches for repair or cleaning. We have used those with great success. We actually have an expiration of the existing first round of IDCs we did coming up this year, which will be reissuing a qualifications package for those. We've been adding into that qualifications package some additional work for basically like small scale construction repair work, replacing boxes, damaged pipes, which we generally do now either through an emergency repair or through an advertised bid if we have time, before it's obviously a safety issue in terms of time. So they are great. They're a very valuable resource. They provide a lot of flexibility in the work you can do, but you are correct in that they're, I like to call them a force multiplier instead of a force like addition, in that you have to have a person managing the contract work and coming with the estimates and getting the scope set up, and then obviously working through the construction project with the firm or the clean project with the firm, and then processing and working through payroll. It's not a new employer hiring. It's someone who's basically doing more than that one person could do by themselves. So we are a little bit limited. The project manager position we talked about that was vacant is the small projects project manager. So that's the one that generally manages the IDC work in addition to the large scale capital projects that the other project managers are working through. So we do use them, but maybe not quite to the extent that we could if we had a little bit of extra capacity and managerial roles.
Just as a follow-up, because I'm still going back to, I mean, while there may not be a project manager available, is there something else that we could do in order to get this done? I mean, just to think that the reason why we can't be aggressive on taking care of some of the small projects like ditch cleaning, okay, what's stopping us as a project manager?
So it's not quite that straightforward.
Well, that's why I really want to really get into it, because I mean, given what's going on with ditches and the effects that it's having on people, for me, that would be a number one priority. And I just think that it's fixable. If it's simply finding someone to try to manage it, even if we have to find someone internally to do it. I mean, we've been looking at the editorials and all the articles in the paper recently. Folks are looking at us to solve it and to solve it as quickly as possible. And this is something you inherited. I'm just saying we really need to get these small projects done and not hold them hostage because we don't have someone to oversee or manage it. For me, that's not acceptable. I think we need to find someone to take care of something that's plaguing our residents, and it's been doing it for years. I'm not quite sure how to fix it, but if it's management, I think we need to find somebody to do it so that we can really affect change. And given the season that we're in, it's going to be crazy out there in the next week or so. And it's hard for me to tell people in my district, especially on the island in particular, that the reason why we can't fix it is because of staffing. That gets old after a while. And Mr. Mayor, I just think that we need to try to find a way to fix it, because it is becoming very political, extremely political at this point. And I just think that we need to do something ASAP to take care of management issue. That's just not good enough for me to tell my constituents. I need to be able to tell them more than that at this point.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Shade and Saccharin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And there was a very good discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about looking outside the box and thinking outside the box. And a couple of months ago, I called Councilman Waring about trash pickup and debris pickup, looking at other CDL drivers who are employed by the city, who we may need to sort of rearrange, I guess, or use in different capacities to help with that process. But Mr. Fountain's department is understaffed. I mean, it is just a matter of fact. It's understaffed, and you just can't send a crew out without some type of somebody directing them and leading them on what needs to be done. In Northbridge right now, his crews are out there very active on opening up ditches that have been neglected for the past, I guess, 30 years or so. And this is a time-consuming project. And believe it or not, it will surprise some folks, there's a lot of pushback on opening up these ditches. I mean, there's a whole lot of pushback on, and Mr. Fountain and I have been exchanging these emails that we're getting from folks who don't want us out there, don't want us, which is somewhat shocking to me about doing that. So I hear everybody. We've got to be aggressive. But we also have got to be realistic, balancing. You've got to have bodies out there doing this, and you got to have equipment doing this as well. And what I mentioned yesterday in our public service, public works committee meeting, getting these backyard ditches open is another issue that we've been wrestling with, and it's not a simple solution because we got to hire a surveyor to go out because these lines have been so abandoned. We've got to reestablish those lines being out there. So it is frustrating, and people are tired of hearing us come up with what we presume as being excuses. It's just reality, and we've got to help Matt and give him all the resources that we can. And one other comment about that. Ms. Wharton brings this to our attention all the time, that when you start thinking about paying a city employee, even a contractor, a higher rate than other city employees, it has a ripple effect on the other employees. And we have to be cognizant of that as well. So I just mentioned that. Councilmember Gregory, you got some really fine points, and I'm very supportive of what you've just said. But we've got to figure out really the source of the issue, which is bodies out there, lots of bodies out there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Fountain, Matt had you and I had a good conversation last week and talked a little bit about some of the nuance of this. And it's not, a direct linear, you do this and you're going to get this. But my question to you is this a compensation issue in terms of you can't recruit folks because we're not offering the correct pay, competitive pay.
Sure, that is certainly a fair characterization.
So what are we doing on it? This is not a Matt Fountain issue. This is an HR issue. What are we doing? What I'm saying though, is if this is a compensation issue, what are we doing to address the compensation for Mr. Fountain's team?
Well, one of the top budget requests for next year for not just stormwater, from almost every department. The first priority was to have a better compensation
Right,
for our
that's
employees.
for next year. I mean, to Councilman
correct.
Bell's point, I feel like sometimes we have to be a little bit more flexible, and nimble in targets, and it's an organization. So there are critical needs across the organization. This is one of those needs. Is there a reason we can't fund those positions today? Now?
Well, a month ago, we did adjust our salaries already. That was the first time in, I don't know when, that the city actually made some salary adjustments mid-year. So at this point, I think our next salary adjustments reasonably are going to be this coming January when we put in place a new budget. I mean, I know that Matt's been working with HR to do recruitment. The labor market, I think, is getting a little bit better. You heard Matt Fountain at the report yesterday that he's 100% caught up on trash and garbage pickup 2 weeks in a row. Part of it was some employees who came back, but also part of it was we are starting to hire some new employees. So I invite all of you in your own personal networks to try to help us recruit employees to the city of Charleston. We have over 200 positions available, not just in stormwater, but in other positions as well. I think we need to focus on recruitment. We can do subcontracting, which is really what started the conversation, the question. We do a lot of that now. In fact, it was subcontracting with Trident and Capital Waste that helped us get caught up over the last few weeks. And so, yes, we can do more of that. And I see Ms. Wharton coming forward, but before I address her, let me call on Councilmember Parker and we'll come back to Amy. Councilmember.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I thought that was a motion. I wanted to second it, Councilmember Gregory. I mean, this is certainly, I feel it's a council issue as well. I know Tracy's not here, so there's no data, but I know that in an HR meeting, we did sort of a budget analysis. How much do we need to bring us into the top tier of paying our employees, right? Do we have any data on what we need to complete these maintenance projects? I mean, has anything been done to that effect? How much money do we need to fix XYZ, ditches on James Island, clear this, clear that?
We did when we first ran the small projects program and shifted to a proactive maintenance cycle where we ran through the front yard ditch cleaning that Councilman Shade had referenced and the internal work for pipe cleaning in combination with the IDC contract for pipe cleaning. It's been a little while since I've run the numbers. I believe the cost of cleaning every pipe in the city was just over $30 million on contracts back in 2019. Which would be about double that now. And then ditch cleaning, we don't use as much contractor work for ditch cleaning. In 2019, it was running $10 a linear foot. We have 120 road miles, 240 road miles ditch. We're through about 2/3 of that. So if you were to clean the remaining third under contractors, I need to think for a minute. That's a little bit of mental math for me at the microphone.
That's okay, but maybe that's something, I mean, that's certainly, we receive data to be in this regard all the time. So I certainly think, I mean, and this is where I need to ask council. I mean, again, I don't know if this can't just be an HR issue. I mean, why are we not allocating money to contract companies? I mean, you're saying you already had, what did you say, IDC? There's already a company that you contract out to do this. So where do we find that money? How do we get it into these projects? What do we need to do? I mean, do you need to bring us more data? Is there a number? I mean, we're saying this can't be, we're not going to fix this with hiring and a pay increase of $2, right? I mean, we're not going to solve this problem with, I can't reach, there's no market there for that, but I think this, can we subcontract this out? I think we really need to start talking about that.
So just one clarifying point, the IDCs would require council action that they're currently limited to $500,000 per year by the council, I think, for procurement policy. So obviously, if you were to try to contract out millions of dollars, you'd have to make a significant amendment to the procurement methodology for that. Otherwise, we'd have to go with the traditional lowest bidder contract with scope work and then work off of line item costs.
Councilmember Gregg.
One other thing I'd like to add, I guess, is if we hired somebody tomorrow, a project manager, to run one of these IDIQ contracts, it's not like we could hire them tomorrow and put them out managing these projects. It takes a while to train somebody to do this kind of work. So I think we need to temper our expectations a little bit. I would say that's a 3 to 6 month training period to put somebody out there.
It is. There's also a question of contractor capacity at the moment for pipe cleaning and some other things, but yes, for training, it's generally 3 to 6 months.
We can't just flip a switch. The whole industry is overwhelmed right now. Part of it is because we flooded the market with stimulus money. And so every municipality in the country is doing this kind of work right now. And so there's competition for these services and the engineers that go do this work. So it'd be nice to say we could just write a check and get somebody out here doing this work, but we're competing with every other municipal government in the country for engineers, for pipe cleaners, and it takes a while to train people to do this kind of work. So I felt that needed some clarification.
Thank you. I appreciate that point.
To dig a ditch?
Yeah.
Now this would be people that are managing the crews that are digging ditches, trying to prioritize which ditches are getting cleaned, what's the triage and how you do that. It's not just going and getting a shovel and going to work. If it were, we could all do it.
So I think Ms. Wharton wanted to add something to the discussion, then I'll come back to Councilmember.
Mr. Mayor, I asked her to come for a question. I will ask, but there are others in front of me, so I want to be recognized after everybody else had a chance to speak, because I've already spoken once.
Councilmember Rappel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chairman Waring and Councilmember Gregory, for bringing this issue forward. And it's a very important one, and we've talked a lot about it over the last couple of years. One of the first things I did after getting elected to City Council was participate in one of Senator Sandy Sen's tour de forces of flooding over in West Ashley and James Island. And I was in a marsh behind the Osaka restaurant in South Windermere with representatives from the city, the county, DOT, OCRM, Army Corps of Engineers, and there were probably a handful of other agencies and departments that I'm forgetting right now. And it dawned on me at that point in time that this is a lot more complicated than I had ever thought. You would think that cleaning an outfall, getting mud out of a pipe, would be as simple as sending a guy with a shovel and a crew into that area to do it. And it's not the case. There are few countries in the world that would tolerate this sort of red tape and bureaucracy over a simple matter. And it's not our fault. This is something that runs to the fundamental core of the way we've decided to set up government in this country, in this state. And it is making simple things unbelievably complicated. Almost 2 years later from that time that I was in the marsh and Senator Sen was making fun of the shoes I was wearing, we now have the permits from the Army Corps of Engineers to clean out that outfall back there. And that's due to Matt's great work and our city's commitment to that effort and our state legislative delegation working together and everybody just relentlessly going after that issue. But until we fix the fundamental structural layout of this whole issue in this state. It's just going to be a problem that can't be easily solved. This needs to be much easier. And I think, I wasn't on council when y'all went to Amsterdam and talked to the Dutch, but I think, don't they have flooding authorities and water councils and things of that nature? Water boards. Not, yeah. Well, as long as it's not the water board they're doing in Guantanamo. There just needs to be a way to make this stuff run a lot more efficiently. There's been progress in those efforts. I was at a meeting with DHEC OCRM, about 6 months ago, where we're beginning to start modifying some of these permitting processes to make this much more efficient. But it's a daunting prospect that we face. We need to be doing everything we can. We need to get more folks working for us. We need to do that. We need to find creative ways to make that happen. But until there is a fundamental, paradigm shift around this issue in this state and in this city, I just think we're unfortunately nibbling around the edges. And it comes to the issue of funding as well. I mean, the kind of numbers we just heard throw around. Matt is an extraordinarily bright guy. If he's having to do math in his head and he can't immediately get to the number, it's a big number. I'm going to go ahead and just assume that. So, I mean, we've got to, sometimes I feel like here's the paradigm work. This will be the last thing I'll say. Here's the thing that makes this conversation so strange is, on the one hand, you could make the argument, the city of Charleston, nobody in the state's better at doing this than we are. And what we've done over the past 5-6 years has been truly unbelievable. You can argue we've done more over the past 5 or 6 years than we've done over the past 100. But at the same time, we're still so far away from being able to get to a point where we're maintaining every ditch and every pipe in the city on a regular basis. And a lot of that is outside of our control. We just need to continue to shine a light on these issues and on these problems, learn from the experiences and the benefits that they've brought to us, and just keep working forward as we've been doing. So I don't know if any of that was helpful, but that was on my mind, and I appreciate everyone's efforts to date.
Thank you. Ms. Wharton, did you want to add something to the discussion?
Thank you. I appreciate everything that people said, but I got to be frank. I agree with Councilmember Gregory. The answer is not acceptable. I'll tell you why. On that piece with going into marsh and all that, I believe you 100%. And what we've been doing is those frustrating answers, we've been throwing up our hands as well. If that were the case, I wouldn't be sitting here tonight. Councilman Gregory and Mitchell certainly wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here, Peter, or you. Or there was a time when a lady obviously couldn't even vote. Okay, those things were taken to court. Okay, when we can't clean the outfalls that were originally put there at a certain diameter that's been silted in, and we have federal, state, OCRM telling us that we can't do it, we need to take that to court. We put a man on the moon and brought him back, and we can't clean the pipes of an outfall. Every ditch and pipe eventually lead to the marsh for the outfall. We have accepted unacceptable answers. Take them to court. Spend the money. Provide the leadership. Giving excuses is not why we got elected. Our job is not to give an excuse. And that's what we're doing. We're giving answers that bureaucrats are giving back to us. And I dare say the person that was in that marsh, I don't know if it was the director of that agency. I hope it was. It was a bureaucrat that's been told to give us the answer. Now, when those pipes were originally put there, I don't know what the diameter was, but Mr. Fountain, in particular, the pipes that go underneath the greenway, eventually out to the stoner, do we know the dimensions of that pipe? Do you know the dimensions to it?
There's a series of different pipes under the greenway, but yes, we do know the diameters.
So give me an approximation of the size of the pipe.
They vary.
36 inches?
They vary anywhere from 24 inches to there's some 5x5 box culverts in a couple locations. I think.
And those things were put there 40 years ago? Maybe longer? I'm
I
asking.
mean, the Greenway is generally an old railroad line, so probably 100 years ago.
Okay. Now we've got a community that has needs of a new millennium. And we got a drainage system that a bureaucracy is telling us to stay in place that was done for the last century. And we haven't challenged that. Developers take us to court. A storm is bearing down on us. Emergency situation gives us certain rights. We go in there and clean them out. Guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna sue us. But you know what? Those pipes would have been clean. And we'll be contesting that in court. So right now, we accepting unacceptable answers. And what we want is a relay to go back and tell the people that. And I say that's wrong. The reason I asked Ms. Wharton to come up, those line items that we have appropriated, in particular in stormwater and some of these other departments that have gone unfilled. We voted on the 21 budget. Those monies have already been allocated for various positions that we can't fill. What kind of flexibility, in this case, that Mr. Fountain have, or Mr. Kronberg's have, to be able to take some of those monies, combine them, kind of like what Councilmember Appel said 2 weeks ago, to provide a higher rate of pay, by contract or otherwise, to hire people.
So in a contract situation, we could use some of those salary savings for a contract, which we have done. We've done that a couple of times this year, I think, and how we did our $15 minimum. We've using salary savings to do that because we have so much of it above what we budgeted, right?
Right. And so right now, our strategy is right now. Did everybody hear Ms. Wharton? Okay. Our strategy is right now, as we've done in the past, is those monies would stay there at the end of the year, come December 31, unfulfilled, then it goes back into the general fund, and we kind of repeated the process. Next year comes along, we don't have a higher rate of pay. Again, those jobs don't get filled. The production isn't produced in the neighborhoods, and we're in the same situation. What kind of flexibility is needed for our department head, like Mr. Fountain, who has the intellect and the know-how to be able to take those dollars that's right now sitting in unfilled jobs to allocate it to increase the pay, contract or otherwise, to get it done, get the job done.
I just want to, the end of year for stormwater, that goes into the drainage fund.
Right.
So he would need to restructure, basically. He would need to restructure his positions.
And how long does it take to do that?
It depends on how much you're restructuring, right? I mean, you kind of already have an idea of where you want to go with that.
Great.
So that's what we
Are some of
do.
those ideas going to come to the budget ad hoc this year?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Would anyone else like to be heard
I would.
that hasn't been heard yet? Councilmember Gregory?
Yeah,
Call
just
on you again.
just to follow up. To me, the question is, we're at 15. What will it take? Is it 18? Is it 19? Is it $20 an hour in order to be able to track the and this goes to your question, to track what we need to get the job done? 15, yeah, they'll trickle in. But 15 is not competitive. Nowhere these days. So why are we playing with ourselves here? And I understand compression a little, not as much as I should, that when you give this person a raise, it's going to affect the next and next and go on. Okay. I really at some point would like to find out from a labor attorney, perhaps, to explain compression and under what circumstances we don't have to do that. Because I really don't know. I mean, if we have a need in order to take care of the citizens of this city that pay taxes and the ditches need cleaning. And if it's gonna take $30 an hour, you said, I mean, to get it done, I mean, 30, I mean, that's a bit much. I'm just throwing that out there. But I think that all managers, all of you guys, and not just you, Matt, y'all know what it will take to attract the kind of people you need. Okay, and we know it's not 15. So I think that what we need to do at this point is just call it what it is. If it's 17, if it's 18, let us know so that we can get those vacancies filled, especially when we're talking public safety. Because that's what we're talking. We're talking public safety. So to me, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but that's the only way I know how to get where I think it needs to be. And all this other stuff about why we can't, and it's gonna take 6 months, and so what? At least let's get started. At least a month would be gone. But right now, we're sitting being totally justifiably criticized for not being effective. And this isn't something that just happened today or yesterday. This has been going on since I've been on council, and I've been on council for 14 years. And I just think it's time for us, okay, to get this together. If we're talking small projects, okay, let's not talk small projects anymore when we talk about ditch digging, ditch cleaning. When you're talking about how many miles? You said a million?
No, so for open roadside ditch, there's roughly 120 road miles, which is about 240 ditch miles, so the ditch on either side of the street of city maintained ditch. That's not DOT ditch within the city. That's just roadside ditch on city streets within the city.
And the point I'm making is that why can't we make that a big project?
You could,
instead of small projects and only allocating a million here. Okay, why don't we bring it all together, make it a big project? Ditch cleaning across the board and find out totally what it would take, and let's move forward with it. I just think that we're complicating a little too much. And that managers just need to tell this body how much will it take to fill your vacancies so we can get these jobs done. And I know you're familiar with the indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery contracts. I know you are. When I sent the note, I knew you were. But it is a means, okay, that you yourself has said has been very positive in getting the job done. Let's make it a big project, folks. I don't care what we call it, but we've got to keep the water from coming into these elderly folks' homes. And it's been happening for years. It's time for us to do something. Instead of just saying it's complicated because it's multi-jurisdictional, it's this, that, come on. I'm just saying, let's get the job done.
Mr. Fountain.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Gregg, I do agree with you of trying to get the work done for the open ditch work. We have prioritized that with in-house forces because it's repetitive, straightforward maintenance work. So it's much cheaper to build it internally. So we, out of those 240 miles, 120 road miles, we are through roughly, I have to check the numbers from this quarter, but roughly 70 miles of that in the last 3 years with just the in-house forces running one crew doing that work for the cost of 4 or 5 operators and basically 2 backhoes. So I think what we've said is that we would prefer to prioritize money for that into actual staff positions, filling those staff positions because they can do that work so much cheaper which then frees up more money to put into more difficult project work that we can't necessarily do at a staff level without really expanding what the capacity of the city is for construction, which is a different engagement.
Would it take $18 for you to be able to, I'm sorry. So will it take $18 an hour for you to be able to get the kind of staffing you need so that you can have all the crews?
So this gets back a little bit to what Councilman Greg was talking about earlier, that the $18 an hour is probably pretty close to what we would need for hand clean ditch crews. That would not pay for an equipment operator who would clean roadside ditches, nor the engineer who would do the management of those projects. So it is not that there's a minimum that fully staffs us. There is an adjustment depending on what the skill level and the market is. So we track vacancy rate, retention rate, attraction rate, basically what interest people have in the jobs. We see what other employers are doing. Each position has a different need and a different salary compensation structure that works for that.
Okay, so you need 27, right? Is that the magic number in order for you to have the number of crews necessary?
So that's the number. That's the number of current employees with 30 vacancies.
So you need 30 vacancies in order for people to be able to hand clean ditches?
So out of those 30, only 15 of those are hand clean ditch crews. The other 15 are more skilled equipment operators and other positions.
So is it possible for us to get the 15 and at least get the hand cleaning done? In other words, I'm just trying to make some additional progress. I'm not saying you're not. I don't want you to think. I just think that as a council, we need to get to the bottom and give you what you need.
Yes,
If we don't know, okay, we don't know, we can't help you. We need to give you what you need to get this job done. That's all. That's my bottom line.
Thank you. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. Amen. I'm sorry. I could talk about this all night. I mean, this is why I'm here. This is what I want to be talking about. I've sat in a room with these multiple municipalities. I mean, why are we not doing that more? That I think is my issue with Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you're having these same conversations. I was in a room with DOT, House Rep, County, how do we do this? Councilmember Greg, I'm not an engineer, but we have smart people working for this city. What do we need to do to fix it? We're here to help you. I'm with you, Councilmember Appel. It's not as easy as XYZ. We know that, especially on James Island. Not only do we deal with county and state, we have other just local jurisdictions, but we have MOUs with the Parks Conservancy. I mean, this is great, right? I mean, what are we waiting for to figure out with the county and the state? If it's something we need to do up in Columbia, great. Let's meet with them. I mean, what do we need to do? We have a situation on James Island. We need an Army Corps permit. It's going to take months just to get that permit because we are short on staff or we're bundling all that. I mean, this is just, I said it at the last meeting and that's what I could talk about this all night because this is what we're here to do. I'm new. I'm energetic. Who do we need to talk to in the county, in the state? I mean, if I can get a ditch cleared, I think you mentioned this yesterday at the meeting. If I can get a ditch cleared and I need the county to repair or clear an outfall, I can work on getting that done. The county's very receptive to what do we need them to do? But I need to know what to tell them to do. So I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if this is something that we can create a big project. Can we make it something that we are putting at the forefront of this city, that we're talking about it every single meeting until we figure it out? I mean, this is a storm's coming. I'll be stuck in my neighborhood this weekend, depending on how this plays out. I'll be stuck. Maybe many of you will, right? Councilmember Seekings, downtown. Downtown's a whole different issue. I'm not touching that. We could talk about that for months. But I think what I see, and again, I'm not an engineer, so this is big picture stuff. I understand that. But what I see is a labor market. This is a labor job. I understand maybe we need project managers, but aren't there companies, I'm just going to ask it bluntly, aren't there companies out there that we can hire to help us do this?
So yes, from a project management perspective, there are companies and we do hire them. For perspective, it is very expensive and definitely worth it when we're doing specialized engineering work. For instance, when we're easy example, right, is building the deep tunnel pump station project, right? There's somewhere between 10 and 20 different engineering specialties involved with a project like that. So you're not going to hire 20 full-time engineers who would each only be working for a month or two on a project per year. At a city level, it is much cheaper to hire externally and do that work. I think what we generally try to avoid hiring are people who are performing the day-to-day functions of city staff at a consultant rate. Because typically, and certainly many of the council are professional staff too, typically you're seeing billing rates at roughly 3 times the hourly pay rate for a consulting firm. So it's a little bit disheartening sometimes to staff to see someone making, the person is not making that money, it is the company making that money. But also we talk about vacancies, right? So if you take a vacant position, you need 3 of those vacant positions to replace 1 staff member. So it's very quick to shrink your available amount of resources. So we do use it, we do fill gaps with it, but we're limited by budget on how much of that we can do.
So was that the end of your report? Councilman?
That's the extent of my report. The piece with the budget, Mr. Fountain, that's the 500,000 limit that you're talking about?
So the 500,000 limit is a procurement rule that council has authorized for indefinite delivery contracts. They're limited per company. You can only do $500,000 per year of work authorizations, no more than $100,000 per task authorization.
Given the gravity of where we're at, what is your recommendation on that limitation? Should it be increased? I know you're not going to say it should be decreased.
So there are many functions of the procurement code that generally come to council for approval that certainly do tend to slow down the work aspect. I mean, the $40,000 limit, having 3 written quotes for work that's over $5,000. I mean, any of those things do slow down the work and add quite a bit of administrative effort to the project managers, which does reduce resources. I would say the one caveat that I've mentioned before is that we get back to the project management kind of sometimes being the critical path on how much work we can get done. That, like right now, one of our large project managers, he's not large, the projects he manages are large, is also managing all the small projects, right? So I mean, there's only so much he can do in small project work before we start dropping the ball on larger projects and slowing down larger projects. So there is still a capacity issue with the management. I mean, that's, again, we're 4 out of 6 project managers currently, so that there's percentage wise, that's a pretty big impact. I think that's something we need to fill quickly if we can.
Why don't we do this? Can you put together some recommendations to bring the public works in 2 weeks that maybe can come forward to council at the next meeting?
Again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's the extent of my report.
Thank you. So just before we move on, I want to thank Matt, and we've complimented him at many of your committee meetings because y'all, I get it, and I appreciate the willingness for us to support them to get the job done. And the labor market has been crazy, but in the last few years, they have managed more large projects. They've managed more small projects. They've cleaned more ditches than this city ever did in the early years of your service, Councilmember Gregory. We weren't even doing a regular maintenance of all our ditches. You got 240 miles of them. Honestly, you have to prioritize things sometimes. Some of those 240 miles of ditches aren't creating any problems. And so, Councilmember Waring, I appreciate you bringing the specificity of particular folks who've had problems of water getting in their homes, for example. Honestly, I haven't heard of that many of them in the last few years since the last big storm we had. I know there was one noted in the paper recently. As it turned out, they had a problem similar to Councilmember Pell a couple of years ago where there wasn't a easement alongside the property for us to have the legal right to go clean the ditch, even if we had the personnel to go do it. So, the amount of work that they have accomplished over the last few years has been pretty amazing. I'm not saying everything spoken here tonight, needs to be addressed to pay our workers more, to fill those ranks so we can do it. But even so, there is a game plan out there. We're not cleaning 240 miles of ditches in 1 year. We're going to rotate them over time in a very reasonable, logical fashion, assuming we have the employees and things. In the meantime, you know, we got so many other things like cleaning out the old archway tunnels, to installing more check valves. We approved one tonight. I mean, there is a lot going on. A lot of it's good. We got to work on some stuff. I'll admit it. Thank you for bringing it up. Let's move on and let's council.
Just a quick question. How much did you say if we bring in outside contractors per linear foot, generally they charge us?
For pipe or open ditch?
Yeah, well, ditch.
Open ditch is going to be roughly $20 a linear foot
So just
for roadside ditches.
25 million bucks. Just if we did that.
For the
just to
entire-
show-
yes,
Just to
yeah.
show to the point that this isn't small project stuff, it's big project stuff, and we just need to keep that in perspective. If we contracted all that out, 240 miles, it's $25,344,000.
And just for perspective, the department budget is $14 million.
Right. Right. So gotcha. That's helpful. When we come back to Public Works, we need to take that up and think about that. Budgets against reality are things that we really need to be thinking about. And then to Councilmember Parker's point, we need to go out there and get some help. So, I mean.
Next up is, would have been our special committee on public safety. Unfortunately, with scheduling, they weren't able to meet today, but we'll be coming back to them, I'm sure.
We
by
do not
next
have a
meeting.
forum present
So-
for public safety, so we'll try to reschedule that at a later date.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next up is our committee. on
Move for
Ways
approval.
and Means, as amended. May I ask, because we made a couple amendments to the Ways and Means budget. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next up is our bills for second reading. We have 9 items, I believe.
Move that items 1 through 9 be taken together.
Okay. Any discussion on any of those? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now for third reading.
Move for third reading.
ratification. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next up, we got bills for first reading. We have ordinance regarding the Special Commission on Equity, Inclusion, and Racial Conciliation.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, any discussion on that? Councilmember Parker and then Shade.
Oh, Councilmember Shade, if you want, if you'd like to go first, that's fine. Okay.
There you go. Yeah, I got a green light. And I'm glad we're having this come up for consideration. And I think I'm sort of the guilty party for bringing this forward because we realize that we're having some issues on as brought up to our attention at the public comment period of fulfilling the vacancies on our special commission. So one of the things I brought up at a time was that this amendment should not just be applied to this commission. We have other boards and we have other commissions that by ordinance are created with our input and our recommendation to bring up somebody to fill that particular slot. We have a privilege of nominating somebody in that slot. So my request really was in addressing this particular issue to make an ordinance to cover all of our commissions so that in the event that we have a opportunity to appoint someone as a representative from District 9 or District 8 or District 12, if there's a vacancy or we're unable to fill that we have a mechanism that perhaps mayor or some other way of filling that. So I'm going to vote for this tonight. I think we need to do this to get it going. But I really would like for legal to prepare it, maybe a broad umbrella ordinance to address other commissions that have vacancies when we don't have the opportunity to appoint that because of our inability to find somebody or we can't get someone to agree to that. that person, the mayor has maybe that process or some other process to have that squared away. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Parker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would just agree that, I think, Mr. Mayor, you know that I have asked IT and I believe that Mayor's office that you run the website that shows our constituents, all of our commissions and committees and things that they can join. And it's very, very out of date. So they've been working on that, I think, with your office.
I think we're switching over to a different software soon.
Okay, so I would really encourage, I think this should be an across the board, I would definitely, agree with what Councilmember Shade said, that hopefully legal can come up with something, because I'm sure that there are a lot of commissions with vacant seats that people would be willing to fill. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you, Mayor. It sounds to me that we will probably pass this, but I just want to encourage my fellow council members to give this first reading. These are very light changes to the ordinance. But with that, I did want to take this time to recognize Ms. Adrienne Swinton, who's the new manager for the office. Adrienne, if you could please stand. She started back in June or July? August. It seems like it's been forever, but you hit the ground running. Wanted to make sure that folks knew who you were. And then I'm going to encourage our council members as well as the mayor to make sure that you come back at some point for a full debrief on what you've encountered for the couple months of your job. I think it'd be helpful for council to hear that. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Good idea. Councilmember Shealy, I think, would like.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to be clear, I wanted to make sure on this that we're talking about now, if someone has missed 3 meetings, then the mayor would appoint someone to take the place of that person. Am I correct on that?
I think I would recommend it to council and y'all would actually approve the person, but I would go ahead and take the initiative to recommend someone.
All right. And I understand the idea there and trying to get somebody on there quickly. I know that when we formed this particular commission, we were trying to make it where every council member, had a representative or represented on this commission. I'm kind of a guilty party on here because the person I recommended is no longer on that committee, but I just feel like that it ought to go back to that council member first to see if the council member could replace that. And within a certain amount of time, if that doesn't happen, then maybe it goes to the mayor. But I just feel like the way we form this and the amount of time that we spent spreading that out, I just feel like it ought to go back to that council member first for at least a certain amount of time before moving on to, to a nomination outside of that council member.
I think that's the intent of what we have, and that you would have 3 months or 3 meetings worth to bring forward a new recommendation. If your appointee, for whatever reason, resigned or no longer was willing to serve.
Yeah, I understand that if they've resigned, but the way this reads is if they miss 3 meetings, I believe, which I understand. We've got to have people on there. I understand that. I don't know. I just felt like before it goes back to that, we ought to see if we can reach back to that council member.
Understood. Councilmember Gregg was next, and then I'll come to Waring.
The way I read this, it says in the event any seat remains open for more than 3 meetings attributable to a council member. So I don't read that to mean that they missed 3 meetings. I mean, that to me, that sounds like if a council member has failed to appoint somebody for 3 months, then Mayor Tecklenburg or the mayor would have an opportunity to appoint that person. So maybe we need some clarification around this language, because the way I read it was that if the seat remained open, meaning a council member hadn't appointed a person. So
I think that was the intent. Yeah, that was the intent.
okay, maybe if we could clarify that.
Maybe we could say it a little more clearly when it comes back for second reading. How about that? Councilmember Gregory and then Waring. Oh, you're good, Councilmember
Yeah,
Waring.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that portion, but the piece that Councilman Shealy is saying, if the person, let's say I appointed, went to a meeting and didn't like it. And I didn't know that they weren't going to the meetings. That vacancy should be brought to my attention, and that's what
It should be.
and I have a
should be.
chance to reappoint.
We're happy to clarify that as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that makes sense.
I think that's right. All right. Any other discussion or suggestions? Councilmember Saccharin, did you have another comment? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll dust that up a little bit. And next, we had an item regarding the third amendment to the development agreement for Cane Hoy Plantation.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? We're good. Councilmember Gregg? Yeah, all right. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, should we have a motion to withdraw number 5? I see it says to be withdrawn.
Yes, sir. Staff has requested that that item be withdrawn from the agenda.
Move that we withdraw on number 5 under.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next, we had a few items to discuss in an executive session, including the legal update and consideration of a resolution, Fire Station 11, to receive legal advice and consideration of potential land purchase, to receive legal advice and consideration of corrective filing on the Dewberry settlement, and to receive legal advice and consideration of proposed Harmony litigation settlement. Can I entertain a motion that we go into
Mayor, before we go into that,
session?
let's make a quick statement. I still ask my, for recreation, parks to get back with me, with the trees that's on, Martin Park. And I haven't heard anything yet, and I wanted them to get back with me to let me know if they was gonna cut those trees back to see how they was going to do it.
Okay,
And I said that at last meeting, and I told them to get back with me by this meeting. I haven't heard one thing from them yet. And that kind of
I
pissed me off a little
apologize
bit.
for that. Well, I have Mr. Kronsberg here. I don't know if right now it's the appropriate time or whether are y'all okay? We'll take a minute and let Mr. Kronsberg address that right now.
So I did talk to the Recreation Department. We have cameras at the facility, but they're only for the internal use of that facility. I don't know what the police department has. Happy to work with the police department if there are additional cameras that they need clearance for.
No, I was saying with the cameras that we had prior to the renovation of the pool, that particular camera was looking over, and they moved it where they have the big equipment on the outside. But the cameras couldn't see because the trees were there to Jackson Street. And I was asking them to look at it to see what they could do if they have to move it or trim the trees, and to get back with me on that. And I haven't heard anything. No one got back with me on that. And that's what I was saying, because the people are asking me, and I get all beat up for it. You all don't hear it, so that's what I'm saying.
Right. I did neglect, I heard you at the last meeting, but I didn't write it down. We will look into it. I did talk to the recreation.
Billy, can you hear me?
They do have cameras inside the facility. We'll look to see if there was one that was moved. But I'll have to defer to the police department if there are security cameras that they monitor or not. We can look into it.
That's the same time when when the two gentlemen got killed and we had the young man jump out of the pool. That particular camera was there outside showing, you can show the Jackson Street, which is right beyond the playground where the pool was.
Well, we'll look into it and get back with you.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Councilmember Rappel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I promised to make the motion for us to go into executive session, but I just wanted to note one thing before we close out the public portion of our proceedings. I was egged on to do this by some colleagues that will go nameless at this time, but y'all might have heard there's some controversy over in Country Club 2 over a road issue over on Frampton and Burning Tree. It has come to my attention that there's an issue, and I just thought it would be helpful. Believe it or not, there's been an enormous amount of work that the city, the DOT, the school district, and I believe there's some other agencies and entities. There's been extraordinary research done by our legal counsel on this. I think at an upcoming council meeting, doesn't have to be the next meeting, but when it's appropriate, if we could maybe get like a staff report on just a summary of everything that's taken place so far for the record, And if we could schedule this, I don't know, before the public comment period of the council meeting, just to make sure everyone's in attendance that may need to hear the report. And Councilman Brady?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, Councilmember, Mr. Somerville and I have been in communication about this issue as well. And having someone from the school district as well as potentially the sheriff's office or whoever provides the school resource officer to put that on the record during a traffic and transportation committee meeting, which will then obviously be reported out at council.
Got it. That sounds great. I really appreciate that. And, maybe if we can even move that at the front of the line before a public comment, that'd be wonderful. And with that being said, I'd like to make a motion for us to
Before you make that motion, the item that was discussed, Mr. Mayor, in executive session on the real estate committee yesterday is not included. There were two of them, but the one that I asked for is not included in, which is to be discussed in the executive session that we're about to go into. And I'd like to have that added to the discussion. I think we have to do, it's not on this
That could be
amendment.
part of the
Ms. Owens.
motion. I listed those 4 items. There was one item, if I could find it in here with the section number.
Right. I want that on.
Referred to.
It was added to the real estate agenda at yesterday's meeting. And we had a full discussion on it. I'd like to have the attorneys explain that to all of council while we're in this executive session.
You can do that.
Right, could you? That's what I'm looking for, the exact language.
Yes, it needs a 2/3 vote.
Uh, 30-4-70A2 to receive legal advice and consideration regarding any plans entered into by the city of Charleston created pursuant to SC code 5-3-311.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So let me just say to the public, since we have a couple of council members on Zoom, we're going to hold this executive session in my office. And since we have 5 items to discuss, it may be a while before we get back. So we'll see you tomorrow or the next day.
Wait.
You what?